Hey guys, welcome. My name is Leogenic, and today I'm gonna show you how to make a West Coast beat. So this is the full product. So you can choose to stay here. So we're gonna mainly focus on song structuring in this tutorial because I noticed a lot of people are really good with making loops and they always get stuck with making these loops. And I myself do that too, like too often. Then I have a nice loop and I throw it away. But song structuring can be like really pleasant and really fun to do if you know some little tricks to do that. So if you actually want to learn more song structuring, make sure to stay. So I noticed in like a lot of West Coast beats vibes, there's always this electro piano or Rhodes, and who plays like sustained chords, like and most of them are like minor or major ninth chords. This is a major nine chord. I think this too. So I use that a lot, and I noticed also that like in the last beat, the chord changes a little, and it functions as like a passing chord. Um, so I came up with this chord progression. So it's pretty simple chord progression, but I did a lot to make it sound more human. You can change the velocities of each note, and you can also use the strum tool to make like a strum effect. So the note will play in like an arpeggio more than just a static chord. And for the post-processing of the Rhodes, I used a little bit of chorus. I used some EQing, and I used a stereo enhancer to make the sound more separated, thus wider. A limiter for the compression, and Vocodex for the reverb, and I'm automating this reverb like at build-ups or when a break hits. And I use this low filter, and I also use this for automation. so the sounds get filtered out if there's like a break or anything. So now we're gonna look at the bass, and I think a lot of people are sleeping on this plugin called GMS. It's free for Fruity Loops 20, and it has a lot of cool sounds, and you can also modify a lot with effects here. And I think it's actually underestimated how good this thing is. So I use this pure bass preset, which sounds like this. Just pretty simple bass, but I slapped some um, crush on it and played a little bit with like the envelope here. Um, and I used some limiter for sidechain, a little bit of distortion, um, some EQ, and a little bit of wave shaper to make the sound more full. Um, and I came up with this particular uh, bass line. And I choose to use like short, choppy bass notes. So yeah, I noticed this was used a lot in West Coast beats. So for the drum beats, this is the drum groove I came up with. So to start off with the snare, let me solo that first. Um, this is snare consisting out of two snares, one for like the lower end and one for the higher end, and together they just create like a packed sound. And I cut off like almost the whole thing of the tail to make the sound more compact and um, in in its place, like without it's like a reverby tail. But I did also put a little bit of reverb on the snare to yeah just make it a little bit more alive, and I put some stereo enhancer on it to make the sound like more lively too. And for the kick, I used a like super compact tight kick. And what you will see a lot in hip hop or any kind of music genre actually is like these note velocities will shift a lot to create more groove and yeah, more rhythmic elements to the track. And for the hi-hats, I used like almost every sample out of this music rated drum sample kit. It's a free kit, and you have like complete drum kits, live recorded samples, and they're really good. So I'm gonna include that in the description too. You can make so nice beats with this. For instance, the hi-hats here are also from that kit. And notice how I also used to play with these velocities of the hi-hats. And then for the cymbals, I use this open hi-hat. Um, and notice how I cut every other drums sound out here to just only that cymbal play here, the open hi-hat. And what I did in the hi-hat is turn the hold completely up and the rest completely down. And what this will do is like play the sound for how long you draw the piano note in. So notice how it just cuts off right here, and I want to let it cut off by the snare, so it gives like this open hi-hat into the snare effect. It's a nice little trick to make your drums sound more groovy and more rhythmic. Um, and then I use this little bit softer open hi-hat, and I also did the exact same thing here, just to fill like other small pauses in there. Next, I added these rim shots. They're super soft, but you can notice them. And I also played with the velocity in these. And they just give like a little bit of extra rhythmic feeling going on. And then I used in the snare pattern at the end little small notes to like let the listener know that the end of the bar is here with like these little snares. So yeah, that's the drum groove. Oh wait, I forget like one important thing, and that are these things, like something like that. You hear it in every West Coast type beat, and it's mostly played on like the fourth of every 8 bars or 8 beats. You hear it in like almost every West Coast beat. As for mixing these drums in, I suggest not go too crazy with it. Like for most of the hi-hats and cymbals, I use like a little bit of EQ, some stereo enhancer if necessary, and some reverb. And also play a lot with the panning of the drums. Like this will also give more stereo feel than if it's all centered in the middle. I would suggest keeping your kick and your snare like in the middle. Um, although you can use the snare with the stereo enhancer to like widen up the snare. But yeah, don't go too crazy with it. So this is what we got so far. So this is just a little loop, like 4 bars. Um, and yeah, pay attention how this open hi-hat here complements the melody over here. And that's a vibe they use a lot in West Coast style. So I noticed they start a lot of West Coast beats with this like glitch kind of feeling by just repeating 4 beats, the same chord, the same bass note, the same hi-hat pattern. And then on the fourth beat, they use the snare to introduce like the drums completely, and then they just start the melody and the whole song actually. They don't use a lot of big intros or anything. So yeah. So next I heard this little synth playing like with an LFO filter on it. So it will like kind of feel like a future bass chord style. But I thought if this was going in the background, it would complement like the bounce a lot. And I'm gonna show you how I made that little thing. There's also GMS. I put up the preset synth 12, and this is like a long sustained note, and I liked it a lot. And then I put the rate of the LFO to like half a beat, synced it to a beat, and then with like kind of 60% the amount of the LFO. And I put a little bit of bit crusher on it, right here at the top. I put it in with glue, and that's basically how I made this little warp synth. And this is how it sounds with like everything on it. And for the post-processing of that thing, I also used a parametric equalizer because without it, there's some high frequencies in that are really, really disturbing for the ear. So this little loop sounds nice and everything, but yeah, it's kind of missing like background sounds and stuff. So I'm gonna look up for more of that. So I found this little, um, yeah, kind of siren blip thingy. I put it super soft, um, and I put like a little bit of reverb and also stereo enhancer on it. And in contrast to the beats, it sounds like this. And I also put a little bit of the out of there because like it's super, yeah, it stops abrupt otherwise, and this makes it fade out like softly. And notice how I put like the beginning of it on this chord here, because I think that's where the song revolves around it, like this chord change here. So I still think there can be a little bit more going on in the background. So I pulled up this final noise. You heard it in a lot of lo-fi hip hop, but also in these kind of beats. Uh, Super soft in the background, also with a little bit of like a filter to not have the complete crackling overtake the whole beat. Um, so yeah, it also adds in to the sound of the whole beat. So after repeating that loop for 2 times, I think it's time for a little bit of new extra taste in the beat. So I have this little, what is the wrong one? I have this little sine lead over here, and I made it with 3 times oscillator. It's basically just a sine wave and all the things. Um, Put it in mono for like the glide effect, and I put some delay, reverb, and equalizing on it, because this sound otherwise will be too much everywhere, all over the place, and taking like a lot of the spectrum. Um, and I created this little lead on top of it. And I also got this little crushed lead. And notice how this just plays the chord like an arpeggio kind of vibe. I also made this one in GMS. It's the crunchy preset, but I also put some bit crush on it. Also a filter to um, yeah, filter in the sound when I think it's needed with an automation clip, and some reverb and some chorus. So just a little bit of post processing, not too much. And I think it was a cool idea to um, make it with like a break come in. So next thing I added was this Fox, like just a random note, and I pitched it in the right key. And what I did here is like the reverse the whole Fox and bend it to the left, and the other one is bent to the right, so you get this feeling that it's going in through your left ear and coming out at your right ear. And it just gives the listener the feeling that you're going to like a next section of the song. So these breaks help a lot to guide your track. Um, yeah, and I also added this little background thingy, and you don't really notice it in the track, but it's yeah, it helps a lot for filling up the spectrum. And I also use some uh, reverb, some dramatic equalizer for cutting off the high end, and also stereo enhance to make the sound more wide. Um, and I also use some delay and reverb on this Fox sample. So after looping these keys for like 4 times, I think it's time for a little bit of change. So I choose to make a little bridge, um, and I uh, like introduce the bridge with this little shaker sample, and I lowered the crush lead like an octave down, and I made like a small change in the melody, so it won't get repetitive. And I also took the sine lead out and the bass, and I draw like a top melody over the chords I already had, and just change the chords a little bit, um, like here and there. And I also used a filter automation um, here to like take all the higher frequencies out for the bridge part, so it won't be like the same volume playing on. And then for the drums, I just took out the kick and the snares, and these super hard open hi-hat, and I changed it for like a softer one. And I changed the snare for this little snap, also with a little bit of reverb and stereo enhancer. And notice how I just don't stop everything at the same moment, but just gradually like let the melodies fade in or out. And I also pitched this wobble synthesizer like an octave up. These are all like super little changes, but they can really give the listener the feel they are listening to a new part of the song. So this is how it sounds then. So notice how I just like let the melodies fade in again with the cutoff, and I also reverse this spacey sample to use as a riser. Pretty simple trick, but it helps really good with making like a small build up. So for the next part of the beat, I wanted to make the second drop, um, and I decided to go for the same kind of stutter glitch effect as in the intro. It's basically just copy and paste here, but I also added this sample of just someone counting up and put a little reverb and filter on it, so it won't be too obvious in the mix. But it just gives a nice little rhythmic feeling, and yeah, who doesn't like a little vocal chop here and there? And for the second drop itself, I decided to change all the melodies. I kept this crush lead melody out of the bridge, and also the melody out of the bridge from the Rhodes. Um, and I added this shaker loop. Normally it would sound like this, but I decided to chop it up a little so it will match the song a little bit better. And it's just in the background, you barely notice it, but just so it won't be exactly the same. And for the bass, I created this little note on the C here instead of the G. Like I normally hit the note on G here, but the C um, just feels a little bit unpredictable, and that's why it sounds nice. And just make like a complete new bass line for this second part so it won't get repetitive. Like I see a lot of people just copy pasting this first part and the second part, but just be a little creative and don't be lazy. Just come on. Um, and yeah, that's basically it for the second drop. So after looping that for like 2 times again, I felt like there needs to be some new elements and stuff. So I introduced the same break again, and I introduce it throughout this reversed Fox, and this only this little lead and the synth loop are playing here. And I just continue the song at the snare, or like the cymbal, I mean. Um, this way you give just like an interesting break for the listener to enjoy. And um, at the second part of this, I change the melody up even more with more melody and chord stacks. Just be creative with this. You can easily come up with something fun by not even having musical knowledge. Like I have no musical knowledge about music theory or anything, and I can come up with this. So be a little bit creative. And I also introduced this little spacey thing again. Can also use it over here, and just change the melodies a little bit again. So now after having two main parts, I think it's a nice time to go for the outro. And I just gradually took out the instruments, like for this chords I played some soft chords over here, with like going down the scale basically, and just made the velocity of them softer. Like a little lead in that melody who's also fading out. These wobble synths are fading out with this automation here. And I decided to just keep the drums and the bass playing with like a little bit of the crushed lead here and some little tiny sample adjustments. Notice how this sample is also made different with like the out cutoff, so it will all fade out instead of just keep on playing. And I brought this element back, so this will give you like a nice delay ending. And I used some like a little break here to don't mess it up with the synth playing again, and with this phone sound. You can also use these kind of sounds with a lot of fun. So that's the complete tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you can give me some feedback on how I can make my videos better, and I know I need to get a better mic, but that's also in planning. I would like to hear that, and I hope you have a nice day.